So welcome everybody. I think we've got as many in as we can wait for into the waiting room. This is the Rocha UK webinar on church land and nature, one of a series we're doing one every few months on big issues that affect nature, the wider environment, climate change, and what you can do about it. I head up Rocha UK and I'm chairing this webinar today. I and my small team are delighted to have you with us, and many of you I know have probably cleared your diaries to do this, so thank you very much. And I'm sure that that's a reflection of just how many of us are passionate about nature and are already doing something to protect it. Let me just now say a little bit about who we are for those who don't know. I'm assuming that many people on this call are already Rocha UK supporters. You know who we are and what we do, but we know there will be some who perhaps have come in via other means, and let me just explain who we are and what we do. So Rocha UK was founded in Southall, West London, very close to where I am now, about 23 years ago. It was set up as a very local Christian conservation charity, working with volunteers, initially to restore a large piece of abandoned land, derelict land, that was turned back into a lovely park for people and nature, and then given back to the local council, the local community. But it spread from there so that we had next 2 reserves of our own, and it's grown again in the intervening years. So a few years ago, the organization, aware of increasingly threatening environmental trends, asked ourselves how we could make more difference nationally, not just locally. So we reset our mission to be one of equipping Christians and churches to care for nature where they are. In other words, not just what we ourselves did as a small team, but how could we help many thousands more people do the same where they are. We reset our mission to equip Christians and churches across the country to care for creation. And on the back of that, we brought in a couple of 2 or 3 programs of work that I'm sure many of you are already involved in. The first one is the Eco Church program that helps churches to do whatever they can with their land, their buildings, their preaching, their engagement with the community to care for God's creation where they are. Many of you will already belong to Eco Church, but there's now 7,000 churches registered for that, which is fantastic. Then we brought in the Partners in Action Conservation Program, working with Christian charities, whether they are retreat centers, conference centers, and increasingly actually some farms that are managed by Christians, and now even cathedrals that have land to help them manage that for nature. We've got 50 members of that, managing more than 7,000 acres together for nature. And since then, we've also brought in the Wild Christian program. You may not be feeling particularly wild, but you're welcome to join that. It's about how Christians can look after the wild things that surround us, from plants to birds to mammals to insects, and also contribute to trying to reverse the rapid acceleration of climate change. So we now have these programs, which are also communities free to join, that you're welcome to join, to work together as Christians to care for nature. That's what we do and how we work. We'll say more about those right at the end if you're interested in participating in those. Without further ado, though, let me go now to the substance of this seminar, and I will be introducing the speakers as we go, and then there will be ample time for questions before we wrap up with some resources to help you do more where you are. So first of all, let me turn to Hannah Eves, if I may. Hannah is our campaigns and policy manager, and she's just going to set out the big picture context in which we're looking at this issue before we move on to 3 very diverse case studies of what different churches are doing in different parts of the country. Hannah, over to you.
Thanks, Andy. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hannah, and as Andy said, I look after our policy and campaigning work here at Rocha. So what that often looks like in practice is that the government or another political party says something about nature, and then I coordinate what we think about it and look for opportunities to campaign for a flourishing natural world. I'm going to give you the brief overview of the question at the heart of this webinar. So what can church land do for nature, and why are we at Rocha UK so interested in this issue? Well, first of all, let's just say that creation care is a core part of our faith. We believe that we have a biblical mandate to steward creation, and that we should be doing everything we can to safeguard wildlife and habitats. First of all, because creation is good and worthy in its own right, but also because nature is currently under significant threat. We also believe that Christians and the church have a powerful voice to advocate for nature. It's estimated that there's about 40,000 churches in the UK. Christians are present in almost every community. So we have a significant voice to speak for the voiceless, whether that's the most poor and vulnerable in our society or nature itself, all of the species beloved by God and who call our earth home. So church land has huge scope to help nature, and that's partly just because of the huge area of land owned and managed by churches. In fact, collectively, churches are one of the UK's largest landowners. It's quite hard to put a definitive number on it, but we estimate that across Christian denominations, the total church land holdings in the UK easily exceed 200,000 acres. That land is made up of the land around churches, quite literally the car parks, gardens, and walkways around our churches, but also the burial grounds, the glebe land, and land owned at a diocesan or denominational level. It is worth noting that at the national church level, the Church of England is the biggest church landowner with an estimated 75,000 acres, and the church commissioners of the Church of England have an additional 100,000 acres, including 17,000 acres of woodland. But one of the places that we at Rocha are seeing church land do amazing things for nature is at that local level. So take churchyards and burial yards, for example. They're actually often already credible places for nature. So, for example, 75% of our yew trees are actually found on church ground, providing a vital habitat for threatened and declining bird species, as well as butterflies, bats, and moths. And species-rich grassland has declined by 97% across the UK since the 1950s. And today, some of the best examples of old meadow habitats are found on church land. So, from flowers and insects living in churchyards to bats in the belfries, the land around our churches is nature's home. And yet, we know that the UK is one of the most nature-depleted parts of the world. State of Nature reports are published every 3 to 4 years, and these reports draw on the latest scientific data from the UK's conservation sector, including from some of the government's own agencies, to provide us with a picture, literally, of the state of nature in the UK. The latest report, which was published in autumn of 2023, found that approaching 1 in 6 UK wildlife species are now at risk of extinction, which is compared with 1 in 10 at the time of the last report in 2019. We saw that 43% of UK birds are in decline. Red squirrel numbers have plummeted by 37% in the last 20 years, and only a fifth of farmland is farmed in a nature-friendly way. Significantly, the report found that climate change is now a major driver of damaged nature, alongside things like farming practices, such as overuse of pesticides, habitat destruction and fragmentation, and pollution of our rivers. So the state of nature in the UK is not looking great, unfortunately. In 2022, the UK signed a historic global deal to halt and reverse biodiversity loss and manage 30% of land and sea for nature by 2030. This is known as 30 by 30. Yet, biodiversity decline shows no sign of slowing. Currently, the UK is set to miss targets to cut emissions and restore nature by a wide margin. And no political party has yet set out the ambitious economy-wide plan that we need to see the UK's environment on the path to recovery. We know that party manifestos are currently being written, and the country will go to the polls in about a month's time. So this means this is a critical moment for us to put pressure on political parties and local candidates to prioritise nature. Our message to all parties at this time is really simple. Nature and climate targets are not nice to have, but essential to maintaining a habitable planet, rich in wildlife, with a viable, functioning global economy. So back to the kind of central question, what can church land do for nature restoration, and why are we so interested in it? Well, we have a lot of land as churches, and we have more of this than we think. We are in a biodiversity crisis, and we need to harness everything at our disposal to deal with that. That's why at Rocha UK, we're doing everything that we can to equip churches to go fast on using any land that they have for nature. In particularly, getting our own hands dirty outside our own local churches, planting wildlife, planting wildflowers, creating spaces for insects, and pointing people in our communities towards a creator God by caring for his creation. So I hope that's given you a sense of kind of the issue at hand and what we're talking about here today. I know Andy will touch later on the natural next question of, so what can we do? But that's all from me.
Thank you very, very much for that overview. And I can see some people photographing the slides. Do feel free. Obviously, these presentations will also be available in the video afterwards, and we can also send a link to those who registered with more information. So there are various ways of getting hold of what you're hearing here and keeping it for posterity and future use. So thank you, Hannah. So can I now go to Helen? So many of you know Helen. She's a well-known face in the Eco Church program, but also at Rocha UK. Helen is our church relations manager and heads up the Eco Church program that many of you will be a part of. Helen, thanks for being here. I know you've been rushing around like a mad thing, working on other matters, of which there are many. Do now tell us a bit about some examples from the Eco Church movement.
Thanks, Andy. It's lovely to be with you all this afternoon. Hannah has given us a great overview of the nature of church and land and the many issues to consider. I particularly want to look through the lens of our local churches and what we can do at a grassroots level, both in our churches where we have land and the care of the land in our wider communities. Whether it's land owned by the church or land we can influence, how we relate to the land and its other inhabitants, human and other than human creatures, says a lot about our relationship with God. Several years ago, after speaking at an event, someone suggested I look up the work of photographer Kieran Dodds, who has captured beautiful images of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo church buildings in Ethiopia, also known as forest churches. And these churches over decades have protected areas of native forests, an act of huge significance in a country where 90% of native forests have been lost over the last century as the population has expanded, probably not dissimilar to figures of forest loss here. In the Amhara province, the only remaining native forests are those that surround the Tewahedo church buildings. We sometimes talk about eco-churches as beacons of hope on many levels. I think that the ability of the church to influence, protect, and restore the land around it could hardly be more strongly illustrated pictorially than by these images of the Tewahedo church. Each forest is seen by its guardians as a miniature Garden of Eden. Of course, I'm not here today to talk about the Ethiopian church, but that same vision that I've just illustrated, I believe, is already beginning to be realised in the UK. There's huge potential in our churches to care for and restore land, impact people and nature, and in so doing, reconciling ourselves to God, each other, and the rest of creation. Land in the Eco Church survey is a significant category. However, today, churches can opt out of this section if they don't have land. But when we launch a revised survey in the next month or two, the land section will no longer be optional, because we know that churches can influence even a small patch of land, a car park, a perimeter, land elsewhere around them, and that great relationships with the wider community can follow. You can find land resources on our website with more to be added soon. You're going to hear some very different stories of churches caring for land over the next 15 minutes or so. Let me share just one story of a church in South Wales and how land, in fact the gifting of land, came to be pivotal in the development of Barry Uniting Church. So on the next slide, their story began in the early 2000s when a piece of land was offered for any church that wanted to develop a new church and community centre for the emerging waterfront development on the old docklands in Barry. A United Reformed Church and a Methodist Church came together to form Barry Uniting Church in 2013. And you can see on the next slide that they were in a porter cabin for some of the early years. While initial ideas were very building orientated, funding was short, and once the church began to meet at the waterfront plot, they first started by developing the garden, and their ideas changed. Working together outside enabled new friendships to form and they began to envisage a sustainable and open community facility for the waterfront area. And they gained a bronze award while they were still meeting in the porter cabin on their site. By 2019, having secured funding for a new building, they undertook an ecological survey on their site, which identified a healthy slowworm population that would need to be moved and protected in the now well-established garden away from the building site. So they moved 156 slowworms over 10 to 12 weeks. I think they went at the pace of the slowworms. They finally had the keys to their new sustainable building named the Bridge Between in the summer of 2021. And you can see on the next slide, they undertook a lot of landscaping around the site, developed an orchard area, wildflower meadow, an extended pond and raised beds for vegetable growing. One of their project partners is an organisation called Vale People First, who work with adults with additional learning needs. And they've embraced the garden and work hard to grow vegetables and flowers during the summer. You can see their finished building and site on the next slide. They actively encourage everyone to take an interest in the environment around the building. They have bird feeders in the trees and on the building itself, and they hold an annual birdwatch coffee morning as part of the RSPB Big Garden Birdwatch in January. They have frogs and newts in their wildlife pond, and the slowworms live happily in the garden, apparently. We'll say more at the end, but there's an opportunity for your church to count any aspect of nature, not just birds, as in the RSPB Big Garden Birdwatch, but something called Churches Count on Nature is happening from this coming Saturday, the 8th of June, to the following Sunday, the 16th of June. An opportunity to just look at what is on your doorstep. Barry Uniting Church's story and that of so many other churches involved in land restoration and regeneration reminds me a little of The Repair Shop. It's a television programme in which people bring along items that have sometimes been in their families for generations. They entrust their dearly loved treasures to be repaired and restored by a team of people who, even more than the specialist skills that they bring, give time, love, and attention to the objects that they are restoring for someone else. I don't know what the skills were of those in Barry Uniting Church when they started their project many years ago, but reading about all that they have done, it's clear that they've given time, love, and attention to this patch of land and its inhabitants, including the slowworms. When the owners return to the repair shop to collect their now restored treasured possessions, there are often tears of joy on both sides. This work, and our work of restoring land, goes way beyond something transactional. Just imagine how God reacts when he sees these sorts of developments unfolding. I think this extract from Barry Uniting Church's waterfront prayer on the next slide summarises it beautifully. Loving God, as we move on to discover how to be the church in a new way, in a new place, tend us and train us so that we may grow and be fruitful, knowing that we are part of your eternal purpose of reconciling people and renewing creation. Help us to follow the way of Jesus through endings to new beginnings. Amen.
Helen, thank you so much. And in many ways, I envy Helen's job because she gets to see half of these places. I would love to book a ticket to see Barry Uniting Church as soon as I can. I'm sure they'll suffer a stampede of people wanting to do the same after this. What an amazing project. Moving on, however, to another close friend of ours, David, Reverend David Primrose. David has been a vicar in the Diocese of Gloucestershire. And David was very enthusiastic about churchyards long before most other people were, as a location for community engagement and missional outreach. He served as the social responsibility officer at the Diocese of Lichfield, and he promoted the environmental and social significance of churchyards, and was very keen in helping Lichfield Cathedral to become one of a Rocha's network of conservation partners in action. He's just recently retired, though nobody expects him to stop agitating for this kind of thing to happen more. And he has been the lead canon on environmental and social justice community outreach at Lichfield before doing that. Really importantly, he's also vice chair of the charity Caring for God's Acre, with which we collaborate very closely in the Church's Count on Nature project. So real specialists in this field. David, really good to have you with us. Tell us a bit more about what you've been doing and what Lichfield shows us can be done on a big area of land around a cathedral. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Andy, and wonderful to be here. Wonderful to see that the photograph that goes with this particular programme is in fact of the north side of Lichfield Cathedral. So good to see we're up there in front. And I've been involved over a 3-year period in trying to focus the cathedral to have an environmental agenda that becomes active. And the site of the cathedral, in terms of actually acreage, may look, if you get a picture now on the next slide, you'll see it's what is comparatively small amount of land around a reasonably large building. And that sense in which church and land, how the building, very often when people say church, you think of the building, can relate to the land around us, is something I've been really keen to be doing over the years. Sometimes people will talk about when they come into the cathedral, they experience some sense of peace and tranquility. And the next slide will show how when you come into the cathedral grounds, people also have that sense of peace and tranquility. And it's how to link those two experiences together. An inside out, outside in campaign has been what I've been very much involved with from the very start. So those who love the inside and those who love the outside connect with each other. We've had a garden and people looking after gardens for a long time. The next slide shows, Andrew, you're going to move through quite quickly, I guess, these slides. When I arrived, there was a gardening group that were really enthusiastic. And they were people who were volunteers who were putting their own time into doing things. And just by being a visible focus, I was able to draw many individuals who were giving them themselves into feeling confident about their environmental ecological contribution. But in doing that, it was quite quickly apparent that we wanted to join things that were national, things that were beyond ourselves. There was a sense quite quickly from registering on eco-church to bronze to silver, and then a struggle over the last, I guess, 15 months as we were going for gold, going for gold, going for gold, and recognizing that the depth of integrity demanded meant that we had to just not aspire to, but have achieved quite a significant lot. So that commitment, I'm told I'm going to be invited back soon, I hope, when the cathedral qualifies for its gold award. We also signed up for Partner in Action, and being a partner in action with Rocha UK was much more about, let's take a really rigorous approach. We had people come down from Rocha UK to not just visit, but inspire and challenge us. And we were able to link together Caring for God's Acre as a partnership deal with Lichfield Diocese. We were able to get from them a land management action plan, which was absolutely pivotal in thinking through with expert advice what we were going to do about the land that we had. At the same time, of course, we knew there were lots of other people to link in with. Helen's already said, churches count on nature. And we, from a very early stage, had children wanting to be involved each year in this week of activity, Churches Count on Nature. We were able to join the RHS It's Your Neighbourhood. So a sense of another organisation committed to the gardens around and how to nurture that. And by joining that, we got lots of encouragement as well. Our own diocese had a churchyards award scheme. So we were volunteers with others in other churchyards around the diocese. And then very fortuitously, not fortuitously, very expertly, we were woven into a bid to the National Lottery Heritage Fund for a significant amount of funding, which meant that we were committed to do the environmental work as part of the heritage restoration alongside it. Along with that, we were very glad to have a good relationship with Staffordshire Wildlife Trust, and they were able to come and bring and work with the forest school children from our cathedral school to, in this case, plant a hedge. And having planted a hedge, we went on later on to try and reclaim for nature some of the grass around the cathedral itself. One of our most precious assets is that grass, that ancient grassland, hasn't been ploughed, hasn't had fertilizers, hasn't had pesticide. All it's happened is it's been chopped and chopped and chopped fortnight after fortnight. And so we were in that stage of saying, we need to actually let it grow. We need to let it develop into something that will eventually become what people aspire to call up, because to begin with, it looks so much more like flowering grasses rather than beautiful, iconic wildflowers. But there are within that some wildflowers beginning to come up. We got a scythe to actually try and mow it in a traditional sense. And within that sense of letting the seed bank of the soil come through again was something that we're very keen to do over the years around. However, all of that is of limited impact without the advantage of some level of interpretation, some level of signage. And one of the things that we understood somewhat to our pain was that unless we explained to people what we were doing and how we were caring for nature, sometimes people's original reaction was adverse. Sometimes people were critical. Sometimes people failed to appreciate. So we did come to a situation, and as I was leaving, very much focused on the situation of saying, we not just have to show in practice what we're doing, but we have to speak it out and actually make sure that that message is conveyed to the many thousands of people who pass through the grounds and into the cathedral and back out again. And so that sense of communicating what we were doing seemed to be fundamental. And on my laptop in the months before I left, I had a rather stunning bird look at me with what felt like somewhat accusatory eyes saying, "So David, what are you doing?" And I ended up using a concept in my own mind. I hope it's of some value to at least some of us listening, of, well, what I'm doing is iconic tokenism. Iconic tokenism. By iconic, I mean an icon is something you click on to get through to something beyond. An icon in the cathedral is an image that you look at to go through and sense the presence and glory of God. And I trust that what we're doing conveys that look and register, engage with and through and register the glory of God. And tokenism, because a token is something that is a genuine representation of the full deal that is to come. It's not the full deal itself, but it's the entitlement, the guarantee that that is to come. And we, as a site, a cathedral site that touches thousands and thousands of people, if we can actually say in a small way, you know, things can be different. We can care for our land in a way that not just gives glory to God, but nurtures his creation, then that token is a promise of what will come. So I left the cathedral with a desire to carry on and see that work move on and on. Very grateful for the partnership with our Rocha UK, both through Eco Church and Partners in Action, and finding myself continued committing through caring for God's Acre and elsewhere to make sure that our church land, our churchyards, are a place that we encounter God in his fullness.
David, thank you very, very much indeed. And I was privileged to be invited to speak up at Lichfield recently. Fortunately, arrived in the daylight hours, had a bit of a look around. It's amazing. So if you find yourself near Lichfield, do just drop in and see what they're getting up to around the cathedral grounds. It's just fantastic. Yeah, I suppose you can go into the church as well, but the garden is on the outside, not on the inside. David, thank you very, very much. And lastly of our case studies, let me turn to Deborah. Deborah Colvin is an educator, an environmental activist, and a really good friend of and to Rocha UK. In a previous life, she tells me she was a farmer and a research scientist, and is currently very much supporting Rocha UK in so many ways with the Eco Church survey, in the speaker program, and assessing gold awards. But actually, Deborah has been a leading figure in also helping St James's Piccadilly, a Grade 1 listed church in the middle of London, to become a gold eco church. It's incredible what they're doing, and I think we're about to see a flavour of that. Deborah, thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's a pleasure to be here, and what inspiring case studies we've heard already. I'm going to speak a little bit about St James's Piccadilly, which is a hyper-urban site. I don't know whether any of you have been there, but sometimes it's referred to as #1 London. I mean, it's literally 100 metres from Piccadilly Circus. So this slide, which is the only one I'm going to share with you, gives a sense, I think, of how land and people have to be knitted really closely together in everything that we do. So I want to talk a little bit about how by transforming people, we can also transform land. So you catch us in the week after we've just been at Chelsea Flower Show. What a strange experience, strange and wonderful in many ways. So I think what I'd like to say now is a little bit about how a church such as us ended up with a show garden on the main avenue at Chelsea Flower Show. I think it's probably the first time a church has been there, and it certainly garnered a lot of interest, and we learnt a lot. So there are three main things I'd like to just say a few words about, really. One is the land itself. So we would take it as read that we do everything that we can to make what land we have as biodiverse as possible. So our footprint is actually pretty much the same size. The garden footprint is the same size as the beautiful Wren Church that it's associated with. And if you throw open the west doors, you can see all the way through to the altar. So that inside-outside feel that David was talking about is very much something that's important to us as well. So I would say over the last 10 to 15 years, key things that we've done on that front, on really enhancing biodiversity, is firstly having a really, really gifted gardener who has been transformational over the last decade. We've got lots of dry shade. You can't see it in that picture, but we've got 7 large plane trees, all with tree protection orders in this relatively small space. So it's dry and it's shady. We also sit up high on top of something like 6 or 7 depth of bodies. So and there's a concrete slab underneath, just underneath that's been there since the war, that really impacts on the drainage as well. So what Catherine, our gardener, has done over the last decade is really got to grips with proper pruning of those enormous trees, opening up the space, letting some light in, and then building a really complex and diverse understory. And that in itself has made a noticeably different microclimate. We also had an uninspiring boundary wall running all along the back of the church along Jermyn Street. That's now a 12-foot high hedge, which is part of the plan to design in places for creatures. Really key thing is, though, that at the same time, a large part of this space, the main living creatures in there are the humans, 300,000 of them a year, or 12,000 a week. So a lot of our thinking has been around how can the people and all the other creatures inhabit the space together. And we think that a large part of our responsibility in terms of helping our land or having the land help us is about demonstrating and educating. So we try and do that. One of the key ways that we do that is finding ways to celebrate the living creation that includes and builds relationship between the people and the other species, and between species and species. So we've done this for many years now with a whole range of creative programs. And I would, if people are interested, please do go to our website, and you can see, if you look at the Earth Justice pages on there, you can see some of the work that we've been doing. Perhaps somebody could put SJP website in the chat. That would be helpful. So, for example, I'll just pick out a couple. in the run-up to COP26 a few years back, we ran a festival which we called Triumph of Delights. This comes from Thomas Traherne. There was a lot of doom and gloom. There still is a lot of doom and gloom, and rightly so. So we thought, let's celebrate this creation. And we had a month-long festival, which culminated in an all-night vigil ahead of the COP. But we had ecologists, we had scientists, we had artists, we had the Natural History Museum, all sorts of stuff going on that encouraged people to get engaged. And this was all largely outside in the garden and courtyard space. A second quick example, we ran a project we called Aftermath, which was about exploring the plants, 42 plants which sprang up in the ruins of the church, which was bombed, 90% destroyed in 1940. And in the aftermath of the bombing, 42 plants sprang up in the ruins of the church. This turned into an enormous project that involved people getting to know plants, learning about what the kinds of characteristics the plants could offer us, learning about resilience for the future, and just getting people to notice things that happened in the cracks. Something that arose out of that was a 30 Days Wild project, which we, instead of going into the garden for our wild activities every day, we had them in the courtyard. We had them sitting on the York Stone, and we had microscopes, and we had a poet, and we chalked poetry on the paving, and we got people to notice that there were over 40 small plants growing in the cracks. So we try and do that kind of thing quite a lot. Please do have a look on the website. And the third key thing for linking people and place and biodiversity is really about worshipping outside. And I would say that over time, we've moved from a regime of having Easter dawn and Maundy Thursday regularly outside to a whole series of celebrating ancient festivals such as Wassail, Lammas, Rogation. To do that in the middle of the city is quite a change for people who possibly are very divorced from the source of their food or divorced from the countryside. So we regularly have a wassail in January. We have a mulberry tree on the site, which has got a whole history of its own. We don't have an apple orchard, so we wassail the mulberry tree, and it kind of links us back to community, to the long history of the church and how the church its agricultural origins were so important. And then Harvest Festival especially is something that we do outdoors every year. The other key liturgical moment is every month, fourth Sunday of the month in the morning, we have what we call an eco-contemplative liturgy, and that's what you can see there, where we meet outdoors, including quite a congregation online as well. And the basis of the liturgy is 15 minutes of silence, where we each go out independently into the garden space and we engage with whatever speaks to us in that garden space. And then we have time to share and hold that in prayer. If you are interested to hear an example of that, as part of our whole Chelsea program, we were in fact, we did a Sunday worship service, and that's available on the BBC Sunday worship website, I think just for another few days. It's been up there for almost a month, so catch it by the end of this week if you would like to. And also arising from that is a Songs of Praise, which is coming along sometime in June. So I name all of these things because because I think of the way that we've engaged with our land and our garden over many years now. This has allowed the opportunity really for us to get along to Chelsea, to talk to people about peace and tranquility, as David mentioned. This is a real haven, this garden, like a pocket park ethos for all of those people in the middle of the city. I think that I've lost my thread, sorry. Yes, so we get to Chelsea because of the work that we've done. A lot of gardens at Chelsea are designed specially for Chelsea. Ours grew out of the work that we're doing. And the last thing to say is we are in the middle of a really big refurbishment project. And the garden that appeared at Chelsea, which included some of the wild aftermath plants, things like valerian, not often seen planted deliberately at Chelsea. That garden will eventually transfer back to Piccadilly, or a form of it, as a kind of biodiverse, human-friendly space, and we'll actually increase the amount of green space that we have at the moment. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Deborah, thank you so much. And if you're ever around one London, do drop in. Again, it's incredible what you've done in that space. There's also a very good coffee shop in the end of St James's called, is it Redemption Coffee? I can well recommend it when you're
Redemption Roasters, yeah.
So fantastic. Thank you so much, Deborah, for all you are doing with us, as well as that presentation. Okay, folks, so we've got 10, 15 minutes now, if we're fast, maybe more like 12 actually, for questions, and you've been sending them in. And so I will now put some of those to the panel. And if we don't get to your questions, forgive us, but we do have a large number of people on this call. But I'm hoping you will also find some of the answers to your questions among the resources. And at the end of this, just to be clear, I'll put up a slide of further resources for you. And if you've got your phones handy, you can photograph it, and then you can track down other resources, because time is short for questions. So the first one is this. Our wildflower area was planted last year and left uncut, but sad to say, nothing has grown again this year. Does it need to be reseeded each year? How should it be managed? I wonder if any of the panelists could have an answer to that one. David's got his hand up. And this is not to you, David, but will all the panelists keep answers very brief so that we can fit as many questions in? So thank you.
And, you know, I'd say go to Cane for God's Acre. They've got the exact advice you need that is specific to your particular areas on their website. So check it out there. It should be able to be something that establishes itself over several years.
And one of the things I know from all of those case studies is that this has taken time. There's a real sense of actually vision here and patience to get to where you guys have got to. What, you know, whether it's Barry or whether it's Lichfield or whether it's St James's Piccadilly, all of these things have taken time to get to the amazing place they are now. Next one. My church has a car park at the back and a flower bed and shrubs at the front. Various questions in the land part of the eco-church survey are not applicable to us, but there is no box for not applicable. So we will be giving quite a lot of negative answers. Oh, so there is a box for not applicable. So we give quite a lot of negative answers, which will not help us to reach the bronze. What do you advise? That looks like one for Helen, I think.
I can certainly try to start off, and then Deborah might want to say more. Yeah, so there are, do as much as you can do with the land that you have, but we are revising the survey, as I mentioned, and there will be two different routes through the land questions for churches that either have a very, very small amount of land or no land at all, but can still do things with land elsewhere. So we're taking into account the different contexts that churches find themselves in.
Thank you for that. And Helen, I think the next one may be for you too. So hi, thanks for organising the event. You're welcome. I would be interested in your views on pesticide herbicide use on church land. I mean, it may be Helen, but also there may be others, David, Deborah, that you've had to also face this in practice. What do you do? So Helen, do you want to kick off and then anybody else contribute?
I think ideally we'd say, please don't use them because they seep into soil, waterways and so on. I can hear a but coming. I realise every church context is different. I think the bottom line is to really try hard to avoid them and use natural forms of pest control. Deborah, David.
Exactly what Helen said.
Exactly what Helen said.
I think you're not going to get a lot of conflict and argument on this panel on that question. Okay, unanimity on that one. I know it's difficult. I was really impressed going to one of our partners in action a while back and looking around their garden and saying, what is this that you planted around the carrots? And they said, oh, that's some herb. I didn't know the name. That's for the slugs. So we provide the food for the slugs, so they leave the carrots alone. That blew my mind. Incredible. Anyway, Next question. I work for, what's the best source of simple, small scale ideas for enhancing nature in your churchyard? David, I think that's one for you.
Caring for God's Acre is set up for that purpose. You can become a member. There's loads of advice on the website. It's just going, looking at those resources, pulling down stuff that inspires you, and also just drawing in people from your own locality, people who love their own gardens, people who want to help and volunteer.
Thanks, David. So yeah, Caring for God's Acre, absolute specialists in this area. What we're also doing in collaboration with them is, as eco churches have their own experience, like David said, and find out what works and what doesn't work. We're also including case studies in on the eco church website, but we also point through to Caring for God's Acre. So there's a real collaboration going on here. Okay. So I work for the Church of England. We have a small churchyard next to the church, but the Church of England nationally has a vast quantity of land that it lets to tenant farmers, etc. The scope to do something with this land, for example, rewilding projects, could be vast. And I would love to know how to encourage this. So who would like to take that one? And Hannah, is that one for you?
I can start off and then others can bring the rear if they like. I think you're absolutely right. As I sort of outlined at the beginning, there is a huge amount of land under the Church of England. And I think one of the things that's so complicated about this issue is it's all divided up into different types of land. So as you mentioned, there's some of it that is leased out to tenant farmers. And I think there's also stuff, there's glebe land, parish land, there's burial yards, and that all brings kind of different issues to the fore. One of the things I'd say is just talk to your church leadership, not only kind of at your level, but at the kind of national level. Talk to the bishops, talk to the kind of Church of England directly about what they can be doing. I think that would be a good place to start on that. And talk to your diocese. So we actually also run a program alongside Eco Church called Eco Diocese, which is all about the diocese is doing a similar thing to Eco Church and kind of really going further on the environment. So I wonder, Helen, if you want to say anything more about Eco Diocese and how that could be a tool for encouraging that.
Thanks, Hannah. I think just to say that all 42 dioceses across England are working through the Eco Diocese Awards. Many of them have got bronze, but at the silver level, absolutely, as Hannah said, land is so much more important, and they're all being asked to have a land management strategy in place. It's not for, we can't possibly dictate what they do with their land, but we can encourage the diocese to look at, understand what land they have, to prioritise areas that are already special for nature, work to restore other areas. So that's a great framework for dioceses, and for other denominations, other denominational award schemes are available. Thanks.
And I think, Andy, sorry, if I may, shall I add that actually also there's an opportunity to engage the Church of England because they are updating their net zero roadmap very soon. So they have a roadmap to net zero, and they at the time excluded land from that, but they're looking at that at the moment and they're reviewing it. So that's another key opportunity for us to say land should be a part of this. If you're talking about climate change, you got to talk about land. So just to add on to my own answer.
So just two things, if I can quickly add, I can see a number of questions here, but I'm trying to give an answer I know I can give and bundle a few together. So the other thing to be aware of is that within our Partner in Action network, we are now having dioceses coming to us saying, how can we consider using all of our land in the diocese or much more of our land, including our investments and our glebe land for nature? The second thing to add is, of course, there was the motion recently at the Church of England Synod about doing more for nature. So we've got a number of hooks that we can hang our request to the church on, from the church commissioners to the diocese to whatever, to be doing more about this. Now, we can point you towards how, but that's a quick answer. The other thing to remember is this Churches Count on Nature. This is the joint collaboration between us as a Rocha UK, between Caring for God's Acre, between the Church of England, I believe the Church in Wales as well, where there's a whole bundle of resources there for what you can do in your local church yard, but it's also will help you to be doing it, to be then saying to your diocesan leaders or the national church, look, we're doing this. What are you prepared to do? I say with my campaigning hat on. So do the practical stuff, but then add value to it by pointing to the leaders to what you're doing and ask them to do the same, is what I would say. Okay. Now we are probably on to our last question. It's one for Deborah. And you know, I hear this so often. Deborah, put you in the spotlight. With St. James's being a Grade 1 listed building, how do you overcome objections to changes that you must have to make it more eco-friendly and to obtain a gold award? I mean, I get a lot of people going, look, this is a really old church. There's nothing we can do. You know, we'll be told we can't.
Yeah.
What's your answer to that?
So for those who don't know, Wren Church 1684, Grade 1 listed, absolutely.
Okay.
And we've had solar panels since 2005. So I think it was the first Grade 1 listed church, and that wasn't me. That was before, but that was by dint of absolute perseverance and just saying this is important. So that kind of put a line in the sand, and I think probably provided a bit of a case study for other things. But things are changing. They really are changing. So, for example, we now, as part of our refurbishment, we have faculty permission and listed building consent for a heat pump in the tower when we finish our big fundraising thing. So, I think what I can say is perseverance. Keep talking to people. Obviously, all the people. It's knowing the people to go to, obviously, but and also that vision. If you show that this vision is compelling, then things are changing, and we can be a part of that change.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Guys, that's all we've got time for on questions. I know there are many, many more, but I will now show you a slide of resources, or my team will, which I hope will help you to find more information if you want it. Let me just point very quickly to what you're going to see there. So if you are not already signed up to the Rocha monthly e-news bulletin or other free bulletins we have, you can quickly sign up to that, which will give you general news that is relevant. We've also got the Wild Christian Bulletin that's very much about what you can do practically in your own home, your own street, and so on. And the Eco Church Connect Bulletin, which is for those doing Eco Church. So please do investigate those. Now, the Root and Branch magazine, now this goes regularly to our regular donors, but the current edition is all about churches and land. So if you want to get that, you can purchase that from the website. But if you become a regular donor, you can give however much you want or as little per month or once a quarter. That magazine will start arriving to you regularly anyway. There's Churches Count on Nature that we've already mentioned, happening for a week, the week after next. And incidentally, if you haven't got your church organized to do it that precise week, there is nothing preventing you fixing another date when you do the same thing. It's a whole bundle of resources. This is a great collaboration between us and Caring for God's Acre and others. Really importantly, and we do want to emphasize the importance of churches raising their voice, doing the practical stuff, but also speaking up. We have the Restore Nature Now March in London, beautifully timed in the run-up to a general election. That was an accident or fortuitous or an act of God. We didn't plan it that way, but it is now perfectly timed to raise our voice in advance of a general election, because none of the parties are actually putting forward a plan that would be sufficient to get the UK back on track with its nature and climate targets. I've talked about the Eco Church website, which has lots of resources, including on land. And if we can get the resources ourselves, we wish to update that thoroughly and add more resources to it in the near future. And then there's the Partners in Action program. So if you are connected with a Christian conference center or a retreat center, or indeed a cathedral that has a lot of land, that may be a relevant program for you. And many of those Partners in Action also receive visitors and want volunteers. You can find details of that on the website. Lastly, our rural reserve, Foxearth Meadows, which is in Essex, on the border of Essex and Sussex. We've got an Act for Nature Day of our own there on 9th of June, where our Jo, who is currently doing the technology, so you can't see her, but our interim head of engagement will be speaking. Jo is herself a theologian, although she's very technically adept. So If you go look up the details of that, you can go and hear Joe speak and have fun with many others and volunteers on our nature reserve in a week's time. Last of all, before we go, just a very big thank you to all of you who do already support Rocha UK. We rely on donations from individuals and churches and a few grants. But if this has been helpful to you, and if you're in a position to do so, of course, it's helpful to us to be able to help many more of you if we can raise the money to do more of this kind of thing. Now, we've currently got an appeal on. It's an appeal specifically focused on churches and land, and we're about halfway there. But if you can help us get to another £10,000, even if it's by giving us just £5, that is really helpful to us, because we're trying to get the capacity to really update our land resources, and also, if possible, to appoint a part-time ecologist so that we can give more advice to churches and dioceses around what they can do with their land right across the denominations. And to be clear, we're an ecumenical organization, although the origins may have been with the Anglican Church. So if you feel so led, please do take a photo of that QR code or go straight there on your phone. We've also put details in the chat of how you can sign up to our free bulletins or make a donation or become a regular donor. But our main desire is to equip you as Christians and churches to do what you can where you are on nature, and now for climate too. So thank you very, very much for coming. Really, really touched that so many of you have given up time on a Tuesday afternoon. Thank you to our panel. It's so good actually to be working with so many really expert volunteers, as well as with some great staff on this issue. We're a tiny organization, but actually if you add in the number of core volunteers working with us, we're probably about 4 times the size of the staff body. That includes people like Deborah, like David, and many, many others, some of whom I can see on the call. It's lovely to have you with us. So thank you very, very much. God bless you in all you're doing where you are, and let's keep each other motivated on this really critical issue of the decade for us and many other people. And just to remind, there will be a recording of this. We will send out information to those who registered with links to further information. So more will be coming to you in your inbox as soon as we can organize it, so that you can select the things that are most used to you and keep working on this. Thank you very, very much indeed, and hope to see you at the next one, probably in a few months' time.